The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a white-hot sky. The sun hit the sand so hard it shimmered like broken glass. Elias Ward's horse moved slow, its breath heavy, hooves sinking into the dust with every step. He had been tracking the outlaw for 3 days. The tracks were fading fast and so was his patience. His water was nearly gone and the wind had started to shift, carrying something dark with it. He tugged the brim of his hat lower, squinting toward the horizon. Storm was coming. Not rain, there hadn't been rain here in months, but sand. Thick, heavy, blinding. The kind that could bury a man alive if he didn't find shelter quick. Elias clicked his tongue and urged his horse forward, eyes scanning for cover. He spotted an old mining shaft half a mile ahead, its wooden beams half collapsed and blackened from time. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The first waves of sand hit his face as he reached the entrance. He covered his mouth with his neck scarf, led the horse inside and tied it to a support beam that still looked sturdy. The air in the mine was cooler, damp with the smell of metal and old dust. His boots crunched over loose gravel as he moved deeper in, one hand on his revolver, the other brushing against the tunnel wall. He wasn't the kind of man who spooked easy, but something about this place didn't sit right. The silence was too complete. No wind, no echo, not even the faint sound of dripping water. He set down his saddlebag, pulled out a lantern and struck a match. The dim flame lit up the rough stone around him, but in the far end of the chamber, something flickered, blue light, faint but steady. He froze. For a moment he thought it might be another man's fire, but no, it pulsed like a heartbeat. He walked closer step by step. The light grew stronger, showing the outlines of metal embedded in the rock. Not tools. Not mining gear. Smooth panels shaped too perfectly to be anything natural. Strange symbols lined the edges, glowing faintly under layers of dust. Elias felt a cold pressure in his chest, curiosity mixed with a quiet warning that he should turn back. But men like him didn't walk away from the unknown. Not when the unknown might lead to answers, or danger. He set his lantern down and brushed the surface with his glove. The panel was warm, humming like a machine half asleep. Then it shifted. A low vibration rolled through the floor, knocking pebbles loose from the ceiling. Elias stepped back, hand instinctively going to his gun, though he knew a bullet wouldn't fix whatever this was. The blue glow brightened until it filled the whole tunnel. Easy, he muttered, half to himself, half to the universe. Then came the sound, a deep rising hum that cut straight through his skull. The air grew heavy. The light surged. He tried to move, but his boots wouldn't lift from the ground. Every instinct screamed to run, but his body felt locked in place. A blinding flash hit him square in the chest, burning white behind his eyes. His stomach turned over as if he were falling without moving. And then silence. When he opened his eyes again, he was still standing. The ground was still solid under his boots. But the air felt different, cleaner, sharper. His lantern was gone. His horse, the mine, everything he knew, gone. He stumbled out of the tunnel, blinking against the sudden brightness. The desert was still there, but it wasn't his desert. The sand glowed faintly blue under the light of 2 suns hanging side by side in the sky. In the distance, where no town had ever been, lights flickered, soft neon colors outlining buildings shaped like saloons but made of metal and glass. Elias's heartbeat steadied. His hand hovered near his revolver, though it felt small now, outdated. He didn't understand where he was or how he got here. But confusion never stopped him before. He mounted his horse, still trembling and wide-eyed, and turned toward the lights. "Guess we ride on," he said quietly. The wind picked up again, whispering through a future he didn't know existed. The first thing Elias noticed when he rode into town was the sound. It wasn't the sound of wagons or horses or the clatter of boots on wooden planks. It was a low mechanical hum that never stopped, like the whole place was breathing through machines. The sign above the main street read New Abilene. It hung from a steel arch, blinking with pale blue light. The air smelled of burnt ozone and dust. The ground beneath his horse wasn't packed dirt but some kind of hardened glass, cracked in places and glowing faintly from below. Elias slowed his horse, eyes shifting from one side of the street to the other, taking it all in. The saloon was the first building he recognized, at least in shape. It had swinging doors, but they shimmered like liquid metal. Inside he saw movement. People drinking, talking, laughing, but not all of them were people. Some had silver arms, glowing eyes, or smooth chrome skin. Androids. Elias dismounted slowly. His boots hit the ground with a dull thud. A few faces turned toward him. Conversations paused. He knew that look, curiosity mixed with suspicion. It was the same in every town he'd ever ridden into, just with different faces now. He tied his horse to a metal post that buzzed faintly when touched, then pushed through the saloon doors. The air inside was cooler, heavy with the smell of oil and whiskey. A mechanical piano played in the corner, real keys but no player. The bartender was an android, polished metal from head to toe with eyes like burning coals. "What'll it be?" the android asked, voice flat but clear. Elias set a coin on the counter then hesitated. The coin was from 1889. Gold. Real gold. He watched as the bartender picked it up, scanned it and made a soft chime. "Antique currency," the machine said. "Valuable. You'll get your drink." The glass slid across the counter, clear liquid that smelled almost like whiskey but sharper. Elias took a sip. It burned like it should. That was enough. He turned on his stool, scanning the room. The people, if that was the right word, were dressed like they'd stepped out of two different centuries. Some wore dusters and wide-brimmed hats. Others had glowing collars and visors over their eyes. He caught sight of a man dealing cards to an android across from him, the pile of credits glowing faintly on the table. Then his eyes found her. At the far end of the bar, half hidden by shadows, a woman was crouched over a small table covered in tools. Sparks flickered as she adjusted the wiring inside a broken rifle that didn't look like any weapon he'd ever seen. Her hair was tied back, streaked with grease. A pair of goggles rested on her head. When she looked up, their eyes met. Hers were a deep green, sharp, assessing, with the kind of focus that made a man feel like he'd been seen through and measured. She stood, wiping her hands on a rag. "You're not from around here." Elias kept his tone steady. "That obvious?" "Yeah," she said, coming closer. "You're carrying a gun older than the town." He looked down at his revolver, still resting in its holster. The barrel was scratched, the handle worn smooth. It suddenly looked like a museum piece in this place. "Still works," he said. "I don't doubt it," she replied, a faint smirk touching her lips. "But it might not help you much here. Things don't always bleed the same way they used to." He didn't respond right away. He was studying her. The confidence in her voice, the small movements of her hands, the way her eyes never stopped watching him. She reminded him of someone he'd known long ago, though he couldn't place who. Finally he said, "Name's Elias Ward." "Nova," she said simply. "Nova Hale." He nodded once. "You fix things. Everything that breaks." She glanced at the glowing rifle on her table. "And sometimes things that shouldn't exist." There was a pause. A few patrons had turned their attention back to their drinks, but Elias could still feel eyes on him. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me something, Nova. What year is this?" She frowned, then gave a short laugh like she thought he was joking. "You're serious?" "Never been more." "Year 2245, she said. He felt it like a punch. 256 years. His throat went dry. His hands tightened slightly on the edge of the bar. Nova noticed. Her expression softened for a second. "You're not from here, are you?" He didn't answer. He couldn't, not yet. The truth sounded insane even to him. Before either could say more, the saloon doors hissed open behind him. The sound of metal boots hitting the floor echoed across the room. 3 men stepped in, half human, half machine, wearing dusters lined with armor plating. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light. The bartender froze. Conversations died again. Nova's voice dropped to a whisper. "Voss Kane's men." Elias didn't move, didn't speak. He could feel the tension in the room. Tight, electric. One of the enforcers pointed toward him. "You, stranger. Voss wants to see you." Elias turned his head slowly, eyes calm but sharp. He looked at Nova for half a second, then back at the enforcer. "Don't reckon I know the man." "You will," the machine man said. "If you don't come quiet, you'll meet the other way." Elias's fingers brushed his gun. He wasn't sure how these things fought, or died, but his instincts didn't care. Nova's hand brushed against his arm, barely a touch. "Don't," she whispered. "Not here. Not yet." He exhaled slowly. The old hunter in him wanted to draw, but something in her voice, steady, knowing, made him stop. He stood up, adjusted his coat and gave a small nod. All right, he said. Lead the way. As they stepped outside into the glowing night, Nova's eyes followed him. There was something in her look. Worry, curiosity, maybe something else. And Elias felt it too. The same pull that had once led him into trouble before. Only this time he didn't know if it was the past chasing him, or the future calling him forward. The ride to Voss Kane's compound was silent except for the hum of the mechanical horses beneath them. Elias sat between two of Kane's men, both half-machine and carrying plasma rifles that pulsed faintly with light. The desert stretched around them in dull bronze and silver tones, the horizon broken by crumbling wind turbines and the skeletons of old machines half buried in the sand. Elias kept his expression still, but his thoughts were sharp and alert. Every movement of the riders beside him, every sound from the shifting sand he took in. He'd been marched to enough outlaws' camps before to know what to expect. Only this one wasn't built from wood and tents. The closer they got, the more the ground began to vibrate. Voss Kane's stronghold rose out of the wasteland like a fortress welded together from metal scraps and old starship hulls. Massive gates slid open with a hiss, and the riders entered a courtyard lined with robotic guards, tall humanoid machines with dull worn plating. Their eyes tracked Elias as he passed. He could feel the weight of their attention, cold and precise. Inside, the air smelled of fuel and dust. A group of workers, some human, some android, moved crates under the glare of neon floodlights. Elias noticed the brand seared into the skin of a few of them. Kane marked his own people. The enforcers dismounted and motioned for Elias to follow. He walked calmly, his boots echoing on the metal floor. His revolver had been taken, but they hadn't found the knife hidden inside his boot. He didn't plan to use it, not yet, but its presence gave him focus. They entered a wide chamber at the center of the compound. It looked like a cross between a sheriff's office and a command room. Holographic maps flickered in the air, showing the town of New Abilene and the nearby mining zones. Behind a long metal desk sat Voss Kane. He wasn't what Elias expected. Kane looked half-human, but his left arm and part of his face had been replaced with smooth alloy plating. His eyes glowed faint blue, faintly alive but not entirely human. He wore a black coat stitched with metallic thread, and his voice when he spoke was deep and smooth, the kind of voice that carried quiet authority. "So," Kane said, studying Elias, "you're the man everyone's been talking about. The stranger who rides a horse that doesn't exist anymore." Elias met his gaze without blinking. "Didn't mean to stir up talk. I just passed through." Kane smiled slightly, a mix of amusement and calculation. "You don't pass through New Abilene. You stay or you disappear. That's the rule here." He stood and walked around the table, hands clasped behind his back. "Your weapon, old but well maintained. I respect that. You're from another time, aren't you?" Elias didn't answer. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Kane continued, voice calm. "You don't need to say it. I can see it. You walk different. You watch people the way old world soldiers used to. You're disciplined. You're dangerous." He stopped in front of Elias, close enough that Elias could see the faint lines where metal met flesh. "I like dangerous men. I can use them." Elias's tone stayed level. "I don't hire out to men who control towns through fear." Kane's smile didn't fade. "Fear works. Always has. People need order. They need someone to protect them, from each other, from the machines, from what's out there." He gestured to the glowing desert beyond the window. "I provide that order." Elias looked past him at the guards standing in silence. "You call that order?" Kane's gaze hardened, but he didn't raise his voice. "I call it survival." A long moment passed. Then Kane leaned slightly closer. "You should think about it, Ward. You don't belong to any world now. You're a man out of time. You can keep pretending you're a hero, or you can make yourself useful." Elias's jaw tightened. "You got the wrong man." Kane turned away, giving a short laugh. "No. I've got exactly the right one. You'll change your mind. Everyone does." He motioned to his guards. "Take him to the holding room. Let him think a while." They shoved Elias toward a corridor lit by flickering lights. The metal floor vibrated faintly with each step. They locked him inside a small cell, walls of reinforced steel, a single bench, and a view of the desert through a barred window. Elias sat, elbows resting on his knees. His mind worked quietly. He wasn't panicked, just focused, counting guards, memorizing their patterns, noting the hum of machinery somewhere behind the walls. After a few minutes he heard footsteps outside. A soft click, then the sound of the door unlocking. He stood ready. It wasn't a guard. It was Nova. She stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind her. The low light caught the dust on her jacket and the faint sheen of sweat on her neck. Her expression was tense. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. "Didn't have much choice," Elias replied. She looked at him, eyes scanning his face. "You told him no? Wasn't planning on working for a man who treats people like property." Her lips curved faintly, half admiration, half frustration. "That's going to get you killed here." "I've heard that before," Elias said. For a moment neither spoke. The tension between them was quiet but heavy. Nova moved closer, lowering her voice. "I can get you out. But you have to trust me." Elias studied her eyes, steady, serious, no hint of deceit. "Why help me?" "Because Cain doesn't lose. And because, maybe you're the first person I've seen here who doesn't just accept things as they are." Elias nodded once. "Then let's move." She hesitated, then stepped closer to him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body against his arm. Her hand brushed against his when she passed him a small device, a key shaped from glass and wire. The touch lingered for half a second longer than necessary. Both of them noticed. "Follow my lead," she said quietly. He gave a single nod. "After you." As they slipped into the corridor, Elias's heartbeat slowed to its old rhythm, calm, steady, ready. He didn't know where Nova Hale was leading him or what waited beyond the walls of that fortress, but one thing was certain. He trusted her more than anyone else in this world. And that, he knew, was dangerous. The morning light bled through the torn curtains of the saloon room where Cole had spent the night. He sat on the edge of the bed, shirt half buttoned, eyes fixed on the strange silver device resting on the nightstand, the one he found buried near the canyon. It pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. Every few seconds, a low hum echoed from it, unsettling in a way that made his instincts tighten. He wasn't the kind of man who believed in magic or ghosts. But that hum, it wasn't anything from his world. Cole holstered his revolver and stepped outside. The town was just waking up. Dust swirled through the air, and the sun hit the broken windows of the saloon across the street. As he adjusted his hat, he saw her again, the woman. She stood near the blacksmith's shop, hair tied back, wearing clothes that didn't belong to any decade he knew. Her long leather coat shimmered oddly under the light. The townsfolk gave her space, whispering as she walked. Cole's chest tightened. He'd seen her the night before, just before the explosion at the canyon, and now she was here, calm, almost waiting. He crossed the street, boots crunching on dry gravel. "Morning," he said, his tone casual, but his hand stayed close to his gun. She turned her head slightly, eyes cold but curious. "You found it, didn't you?" That voice, it was smooth, clipped, like someone from a place where people didn't waste words. Cole's brow furrowed. "You mean that thing hummin' in my room?" "Yeah." "You planning on telling me what the hell it is?" "It doesn't belong here," she said quietly. "And neither do I." Her gaze locked with his, and for a long moment neither spoke. Cole felt something shift, an instinctive pull he couldn't name. She was beautiful, not in the painted saloon way, but in the way she carried herself. Alert, dangerous, unafraid. He noticed the faint burn marks along her left wrist, and a small metallic device strapped under her sleeve. Something about her didn't fit, not the way she moved, not the calm confidence she had. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said. But something, or someone, changed the timeline. He stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about, but if this is some kind of trick—" "It's not a trick," she interrupted, stepping closer. "That device you found, it's a temporal anchor. Without it, this place, this time collapses." Cole's pulse quickened. He didn't believe in time travel, but something about the steadiness in her eyes made it hard to doubt her. He studied her face, the slight tremor in her jaw, the exhaustion in her eyes. She wasn't lying. "Then what happens if I don't give it back?" he asked quietly. She held his gaze. "Then you'll lose everything you've ever known." For a moment the world felt still, the air heavy, the sounds of the town distant. Cole didn't move, didn't speak. There was something in her eyes, not just fear but guilt. "Come with me," she said finally. There's something you need to see. Cole hesitated then nodded once. His instincts screamed caution but curiosity and something deeper pulled him forward. As they walked out of town toward the canyon their steps fell in rhythm. The silence between them grew heavy, almost intimate. Once their hands brushed. A fleeting touch that sent a strange current through him. She didn't pull away immediately and neither did he. When they reached the canyon ridge she turned to him. You were supposed to die here, Cole. He froze. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and iron. Supposed to? Yes, she said softly. But you didn't. And now the future, my future, is unraveling. Her eyes glistened and for the first time she looked human, fragile even. Cole felt an unfamiliar ache in his chest. Then I guess you came here to fix that, he said. She took a deep breath. No. I came here to decide if I can let you live. They stood there, two people from different centuries, bound by something they didn't understand, as the hum of the silver device echoed from the canyon below. And for the first time, Cole wasn't sure if his greatest threat was the future she came from, or the feeling growing between them. The sun had long disappeared behind the red cliffs when Cole and the woman, her name he'd finally learned was Alara, made camp near the canyon's edge. The air was cool but the ground still held the day's heat. A small fire flickered between them, its orange glow cutting through the darkness. Cole worked in silence, cleaning his revolver piece by piece. He didn't look at her but he felt her eyes on him. Every movement she made, the way she sat with her knees drawn up, the way her hands trembled slightly when she touched the device on her wrist, caught his attention. He didn't know if it was mistrust or attraction that made his chest tighten whenever she spoke. Alara broke the silence first. You think I'm lying, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Cole looked up. I think you're hiding something. Folks who don't tell the full story usually have a reason. Her gaze dropped to the fire. You wouldn't believe the full story even if I told you. He watched her for a long moment. The flickering light softened her face and for the first time since they met, he noticed how young she looked. Not weak but burdened. Try me, he said finally. She hesitated then leaned closer. I was sent back here to make sure the anchor stays buried. If it's activated it could fracture the timeline, erase everything that ever happened after this moment. Cole frowned. You're saying, I'm part of that? Yes. Her eyes met his. Your survival changed history. He exhaled slowly. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence. He didn't know what to believe but something in her tone, the mix of sorrow and duty, told him she wasn't just spinning a story. Why me? He asked. What makes me so damn important? She didn't answer right away. Instead she reached into her coat and pulled out a small, cracked photograph. Old, worn but unmistakable. She handed it to him. Cole froze. The man in the picture looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same jawline, but the clothes, the setting, everything else was different. That's impossible, he muttered. Alara's voice softened. It's not. You're my great-grandfather. He stared at her, the words not sinking in at first. Then his stomach twisted. You came here to kill your own blood? Tears welled in her eyes but she blinked them back. I came here to save my world. The fire hissed as the wind shifted. Cole felt anger and confusion collide inside him. He stood, pacing slowly, his boots crunching against the dirt. So what now? You shoot me and everything goes back to normal? Her voice cracked. I don't know anymore. He turned toward her, jaw tight. She wasn't armed, at least not visibly. Her shoulders trembled as she stared into the flames. Something in him broke a little seeing that. He'd seen fear before but this wasn't fear of death. It was fear of choice. Without thinking he crouched beside her. You don't look like a killer, he said quietly. She gave a bitter laugh. You don't look like someone who should have changed time. Their eyes met. Neither moved for several seconds. The space between them felt charged, heavy with everything unsaid. Alara looked away first, her breath unsteady. You should sleep. We move at dawn. He didn't answer. He reached out, resting a rough hand on hers. She froze, startled, then didn't pull back. Her skin was cool, trembling under his touch. For a brief moment the world outside the fire didn't exist. Not the canyon, not the danger, not the mission that hung over her head. Just the two of them sitting too close, both knowing they shouldn't be. She finally whispered, If I can't do what I came here to do, everything I love will disappear. Cole's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Then maybe it's time someone else did the fightin' for you. Her eyes lifted to meet his, tired, conflicted but drawn to him all the same. He leaned in slightly, close enough to feel her breath, but stopped himself. She didn't pull away. For a heartbeat they just stayed like that, two people from different centuries caught in something neither could control. Then she stood abruptly, turning toward the dark horizon. "We leave at first light," she said, her voice steady again. But when she walked away, he saw her shoulders tremble in the firelight. Cole watched her silhouette fade into the shadows, a strange ache tightening in his chest. He wasn't sure what she was fighting harder, her mission or what was starting to happen between them. He looked down at the photo one last time before tucking it into his coat pocket. Tomorrow would bring decisions. Maybe even blood. But tonight, under the cold desert stars, he finally admitted the truth to himself. He didn't want her to leave. Dawn broke pale and cold over the canyon. A low wind moved through the rocks, carrying fine sand that stung the skin. Cole saddled the horse in silence, his mind still circling around what Alara had said the night before. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes he saw her face, not the calm mask she wore when talking about her mission, but the brief look of fear she tried to hide. Alara walked toward him, pulling her coat tight against the chill. She didn't meet his eyes. The air between them was heavy, not with anger but with things left unsaid. "You ready?" she asked. "Been ready since you decided not to shoot me," he said, checking the rifle strap across his shoulder. She gave a quick, humorless smile. "Don't make me reconsider." They mounted and rode toward Red Hollow, following a narrow trail through broken ridges. The ground was uneven, marked by old tire tracks and animal bones half buried in sand. The silence stretched on for miles. No birds, no voices, just the creak of leather and the distant hum of the wind. Cole scanned the horizon constantly. Something about the quiet didn't sit right. Too still. Too empty. He slowed the horse. "Stop." Alara tensed. "What is it?" "Tracks, fresh ones." She leaned forward, her hand brushing his shoulder for balance as she looked. He felt the touch more than he wanted to admit. The prints were deep. Several riders, maybe 6 or 7. "Outlaws?" she asked. "Not the kind I know," he said. "Look." He pointed to a faint shimmer along the ridge, a distortion in the air like heat waves. Before he could speak again, a sharp whistle cut through the silence. A split second later the ground erupted, energy rounds slamming into the dirt near their feet. "Down!" Cole shouted. He pulled Alara off the horse, rolling with her behind a cluster of rocks as the animal bolted. Dust filled the air, the sound of gunfire echoing off the canyon walls. Alara's breathing came fast and shallow. She fumbled with a small device on her belt, a compact blaster clearly not built for firefights. Cole peeked over the rock, saw figures moving on the ridge. Bandits, half human, half mechanical, their metal limbs catching the light. "Bandits," he muttered. "They've got new toys." He steadied his rifle and fired. One shot hit a bandit square in the chest, sparks flying as it went down. Another ducked behind a rock, returning fire. The rounds hissed past, close enough for Cole to feel the heat against his cheek. Alara crouched beside him, trying to aim her weapon. Her hands shook slightly. He covered her hand with his, steadying it. "Slow down. Wait for them to move." She nodded, swallowed hard and focused. When a bandit rose to fire, she squeezed the trigger. The blast hit, knocking the attacker backward. Her eyes widened in shock. Cole gave her a quick nod. "Not bad for someone who fixes machines." "Guess I learned something from building them," she said, her voice tight. The gunfight lasted minutes that felt like hours. When it finally quieted, the smell of scorched sand filled the air. Cole stood carefully, checking the ridge. The bandits were down. Some destroyed, some retreating. He turned back to Alara. She sat on the ground, breathing hard, dust streaking her face. He crouched beside her. "You hit." She shook her head. "No, I didn't think it would feel like that." He looked at her hands, still trembling slightly. "First time shootin' at something that shoots back?" "Yeah." He reached into his pack, pulled out a canteen and handed it to her. She drank, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The fight had stripped away whatever distance they'd built. Thanks, she said quietly. He gave a small nod. You did fine. The wind picked up again, pushing sand across the bodies of the fallen. Cole watched the horizon, always thinking 2 steps ahead. They'll come back with more. We need cover before nightfall. There's a ridge north of here, she said, standing slowly. Old maintenance bunker. I used it once before. It's hidden. Lead the way. They walked their horses through the canyon, silence falling again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. Something had shifted, trust maybe, or something deeper. When they reached the bunker, the sun was low, bleeding orange light across the rocks. Inside it was dim and cool, the air thick with dust. Cole lit a lantern, set it on a crate and checked the door's lock. Alara sat on the floor back against the wall, staring at her hands. He watched her for a moment, then sat across from her. You did good out there, he said. She shook her head. I almost froze. But you didn't. You kept your head. That's what matters. Her eyes lifted to his. How do you do it? Stay calm when everything's falling apart. He looked down, rubbing the edge of his glove. You don't. You just learn not to show it. The lantern flickered between them. For the first time she smiled, small, tired but real. Maybe you should teach me that, she said. He leaned back against the wall. Maybe I already am. The quiet that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was the kind that settles between 2 people who've already been through too much together. Alara's voice dropped. You saved my life today. He met her gaze. Looks like we're even now. She studied him, his steady hands, the faint scar on his cheek, the calm in his eyes. Something about him made her feel both safe and unsteady at the same time. When he finally closed his eyes to rest, she stayed awake, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest in the dim light. For the first time since she'd arrived in this time, she didn't feel alone. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of metal scraping against stone, distant, cautious, alive. The bandits weren't gone for good. But inside the bunker, under the lantern's glow, the space between them felt quieter, closer, and harder to ignore. The night passed slowly inside the old maintenance bunker. The lantern burned low, casting short shadows across the walls. Elias woke before sunrise, his instincts pulling him up from sleep. Years of bounty hunting had trained him to rise at the first hint of movement, and even here, 200 years away from his time, that habit hadn't faded. He sat up quietly, the blanket slipping from his shoulders. Nova was still asleep, her head resting against a metal crate, one hand loosely holding her blaster. Her breathing was soft, even. The light from the lantern brushed against her face, revealing the dirt and grease smudged from the fight. She looked different when she wasn't moving, when she wasn't trying to be strong. For a few seconds he just watched her, trying to understand why this woman, this stranger from another century, felt so familiar. He turned away before she stirred. There was no point in letting thoughts like that get too deep. He needed a plan. Elias stood and checked the ammo cartridge on his plasma revolver. 2 full cells left. Not much, but enough for one last fight. The ridge outside was quiet. The sky was starting to lighten, 2 suns pushing pale light over the sand and scrap. Somewhere out there, Kane's men were regrouping. He could feel it. The kind of silence before a storm. Nova woke soon after, rubbing her eyes and stretching her neck. You didn't sleep long. Didn't need to, Elias said. You never do you? She asked, managing a small smile. He shrugged. You get used to it. She stood, brushed the dust from her trousers and began organizing tools on a table. The power core on your rifle's still unstable. I can recalibrate it, but we'll need time. How much? 2 hours, maybe less. He nodded. We've got 1 maybe. Her hands hesitated at the sound of that. You think they'll find us that fast? They tracked us through a sandstorm, Elias said. Yeah, they'll find us. Nova set her jaw, then turned to face him. Then we finish this before they do. He studied her, her eyes steady now, voice without fear. Whatever hesitation she'd felt yesterday was gone. She'd made her choice. They spent the next hour preparing. Nova worked on the weapon cores while Elias packed rations, ammo and maps. Every sound echoed. The click of metal, the shuffle of boots, the low hum of the recalibration field. Neither spoke much. Words weren't needed. When she finally handed him the rifle, it gleamed faintly blue in the low light. It'll run cleaner now. Faster charge, better accuracy. He tested the weight, nodded once. You sure you're ready for what's next? I'm not sure of anything, she said quietly. But I know I'm not running again. He almost smiled. That'll do. Outside the air was warm already. Heat shimmered across the horizon as they mounted their horses. Hers a mechanical hybrid with glowing joints, his a dusty brown stallion brought through time by accident and stubborn will. The two moved through the canyon without speaking, every sense alert. When they reached the ridge overlooking New Abilene, the view hit hard. The town burned faintly in the distance. Smoke rose from the saloon district, where neon lights still flickered weakly between columns of ash. Kane's men had moved in. Mechs patrolled the streets, their red eyes scanning every doorway. Nova clenched her jaw. He's making an example out of them. Elias lowered his rifle, steady and calm. Then we make one out of him. They rode closer, stopping at an abandoned shack near the town's edge. Elias dismounted and walked inside first, scanning corners. Safe enough. Nova followed, closing the door behind her. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. The smell of smoke and oil clung to her clothes. He watched her quietly. You can still walk away. There's nothing keeping you here now. Her eyes lifted to meet his. You're here. He didn't reply, but something shifted in his chest. Tight, unfamiliar. He took a slow breath, looking away toward the window. You're not making this easy. Neither are you, she said softly. They stood there for a long moment, both too stubborn to say what they meant. The air between them thickened, heavy with everything unsaid. Elias finally broke the silence. Kane's base is near the power station. He's got the core that opened the gate I came through. If we take it, he loses his control. And if we fail? She asked. He looked at her, steady and certain. Then we make sure we don't. She nodded once. Then we go together. They stepped outside. The suns had risen high now, casting sharp shadows across the sand. Elias adjusted his hat, checking the rifle's charge one last time. Nova checked her pistol, her hands no longer trembling. As they rode toward the smoking town, the heat rolled off the ground in waves. Elias kept his eyes forward, his thoughts quiet but relentless. He knew what was coming. A final fight. Maybe his last. But when he glanced over at Nova, saw the way she sat tall in the saddle, jaw set and eyes locked ahead, something in him steadied. Whatever happened, he wasn't alone anymore. The streets of New Abilene loomed closer, half-shrouded in smoke. The neon signs flickered weakly in the haze, familiar, almost human, trying to stay alive. Elias slowed his horse, lifted his rifle. Nova did the same. Ready? He asked. She exhaled once, slow and sure. Let's finish this. They rode into the fire and light together. The first shot cracked through the smoke before Elias and Nova reached the main street. The bullet hissed past his shoulder and buried itself in a metal post. He didn't flinch, just lowered himself in the saddle and urged his horse forward. Nova stayed close, her mechanical mount kicking up dirt and sparks with each stride. The town was chaos, gunfire echoing between neon-lit buildings, civilians scattering for cover, mechanical enforcers stomping through the alleys with red optics scanning. Elias dismounted near the saloon and pulled Nova behind a pile of broken crates. The smell of smoke and oil burned the air. They've got the whole block locked down, he said, eyes scanning. You see the power station? She nodded, pointing through the haze. Behind the old sheriff's hall. That's where he'll be. Elias looked at her, sweat streaking her face, hair clinging to her cheek, but her eyes were sharp, steady. She wasn't the same woman he'd met in that workshop weeks ago. She'd hardened, not out of anger but survival. And somehow that strength made him feel more responsible for what came next. Once we're in, he said, reloading the plasma cylinder, you find the control core and shut it down. No matter what happens. And what about you? I'll keep Kane busy. Her jaw tightened. You mean you'll go get yourself killed? He met her gaze, voice level. If it keeps you alive, that's a fair trade. Nova didn't respond right away. She stared at him, the dust on his coat, the scars on his hands, the exhaustion behind his calm. Then she shook her head once, firm. No. We finish this together. He opened his mouth to argue, but the look she gave him stopped him cold. He just nodded. Together, then. They moved fast, keeping low as they crossed the street. Gunfire flared from the rooftops. Elias returned a few precise shots, dropping 2 enforcers. Nova darted toward the door of the sheriff's hall, her tools ready. The door control was fused shut. She knelt, sparks flying as she worked. Elias stood beside her, firing short bursts to cover. "Almost there," she said, voice tight with focus. "Make it quick." The door finally gave with a metallic groan and they slipped inside. The hall was dark except for the flicker of red lights tracing the walls. The floor vibrated faintly, power flowing through conduits beneath their feet. Somewhere deeper in the building, a steady hum pulsed. Elias led, moving cautiously through the main corridor. Every sense was on edge. The air smelled like hot metal and gunpowder. His grip on the rifle was steady, but his heartbeat wasn't. He could feel the weight of it, not fear exactly but something close. The knowledge that this was the end one way or another. When they reached the central chamber, Cain was waiting. He stood on a platform surrounded by glowing machinery, his armor pulsing with red light. The left side of his face was covered with polished steel, the rest marked by old scars. His voice carried easily over the hum. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd make it, Ward." Elias didn't move closer yet. "You should have kept wondering." Cain smiled faintly. "You're out of time, cowboy. This world doesn't need relics like you anymore." Nova stepped forward before Elias could stop her. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady. "You built your power on fear. That ends today." Cain's gaze shifted to her. "Ah, the daughter of Hale. Your father built the gate. I just learned how to use it better." Elias raised the rifle. "You talk too much." Cain's smile widened. "Then let's finish it." The fight started fast. Plasma fire lit the chamber, tearing through metal and smoke. Elias rolled behind a column, returning fire in controlled bursts. Nova sprinted toward the console, sparks bursting from the floor as stray shots hit. Cain's mechanical arm extended, slamming into the wall near her, missing by inches. Elias stood, firing 3 quick rounds that hit Cain square in the chest. The outlaw staggered but didn't fall. His armor absorbed most of it. He turned, eyes glowing red. "You're a stubborn one." "Old habit," Elias said, reloading fast. Cain charged. The impact threw Elias against the wall. Pain shot through his ribs, but he held on, jamming his revolver into Cain's side and firing point blank. Sparks exploded. Cain roared, shoving him back. Elias hit the ground hard, gasping, vision blurring for a second. Nova yelled, "Elias now." He looked up, saw her standing at the console, the power core glowing unstable. She'd overloaded it. The gate device pulsed violently, blue and red lights colliding. "Get out," she shouted. "Not without you." Cain turned toward her, fury in his movement. Elias forced himself to his feet, grabbed a fallen rifle and fired until the barrel overheated. The shots tore through Cain's chest plate, breaking the armor and sending him crashing into the reactor pit below. The floor trembled. The light grew blinding. Nova stumbled back as energy surged up the walls. Elias grabbed her and pulled her behind cover. The core exploded in a burst of blue fire, sending a shockwave through the hall. When the dust cleared, the room was silent. The red lights had gone dark. Only the faint hum of cooling metal filled the space. Elias pushed himself up, coughing. "You okay?" Nova nodded weakly. "Yeah. I think so." They stepped over debris, the air still hot. The gate machine was destroyed. The link between times, gone. Elias stood looking at the wreckage for a long moment. "So that's it." Nova turned to him. "You could have gone home, you know. If we hadn't destroyed it." He looked at her, really looked, then shook his head. "I think I already did." She smiled, tired but warm. "You're terrible at goodbyes." "Never learned how." Outside, the fires in the town were dying. The suns hung low, painting the sand in pale gold. People were coming out from hiding, staring at the sky as if unsure they'd survived. Elias and Nova walked down the street together. His arm was bleeding, her sleeve torn, both coated in dust and smoke. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. When they reached the edge of town, Nova stopped and looked back. "What happens now?" Elias adjusted his hat, watching the horizon. "We rebuild. Or we ride. Maybe both." She smiled faintly. "And if the past comes knocking again?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "Then it can wait." For the first time since arriving in this strange world, Elias let himself breathe. Really breathe. The air was warm, the sound of wind over metal and sand oddly calm. Nova stepped closer, her hand brushing his. He didn't move away. They stood there under the twin suns, the ruins of New Abilene behind them, the open desert stretching ahead, not as an ending but as a place to begin. He looked at her once more, quiet, grounded. Let's ride. And together they did, into a world that finally felt like theirs.